supply chainers, wherever you are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and happy Tuesday. My name is Sarah Barnes Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended podcast, and the founder of the Blended Pledge, which is our nonprofit. Go check it out at blendedpledge.org. And I'm super excited to be back here with you today. Yesterday was Canada Day. 4th of July is coming up. It's kind of a short week for everybody, and we've got a really fun episode for you. We've got Patricia from Responsible Sourcing Network, and we're going to be talking about all about forced labor, what you need to know, because they are stopping packages at the border, and you don't want that to be yours. But first, let's get into what is happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain. So we've got a brand new episode that came out not yesterday, but last Monday with SCI, and we talk about borderless e-commerce at your fingertips. Now, I don't know if you've heard about Section 321. There's been a couple of freight forwarders who have had some trouble with it, but SCI out of Canada has been one of the first to adopt it, and they have really perfected it. So if you want to know anything about Section 321, borderless e-commerce, go and check it out. It's episode 414, wherever you listen to the show. Now, yesterday, we came out with a brand new Woman in Supply Chain episode with Evan Sizemore. Now, that's episode 415. Now, either of those you can go check out on the Let's Talk Supply Chain YouTube, also wherever you listen to the show. We've also got it over on LinkedIn. And she talks about all about her journey. She started a business with her husband. They got acquired. She's now with that new company, and she's really inspiring not only the people within her company, but also the people within the industry as well. So go and check that out. And we've got some new live shows coming up that you are not going to want to miss. Remember, if you register or click the attend button, we will send you the link even if you can't attend live. So make sure you click the link. Links are in the comments. If you're over on my personal LinkedIn, I'll put the comments in there after the show. So Relax Talks is talking about dealing with uncertainty. Now that's coming up Wednesday, July 10th at 9 a.m. Eastern. So remember, go and click the attend button because you're not going to want to miss that one. Then on Thursday, July 11th, I'm going to be hosting a LinkedIn Live with Reveal, Parcel Efficiency, plugging cash leaks with cutting edge technology. Now, if you know anything about parcel shipping, this is one of the most difficult parts of supply chain. And you're not going to want to miss this because we are going to be talking all about stories and what retailers have gone through from an e-commerce perspective, how you can save money, how you can make money with your e-commerce. So go ahead, click the attend button, register for the event, and we will see you there as well. Last but not least, Wednesday, July 17th, Christine Barnhart is going to be going live with Supply Chain Unfiltered. You're not going to want to miss this because Christine gives you her hot takes on supply chain. And this one is about mastering supply chain evolution with ASCM. So again, click the attend button, register for this event, and we will send you the link even if you can't attend live. All right, what have we got next? We've got a brand new newsletter, and we're talking about closing the gap, equal pay for all. Now, we talked about this on a blended episode. I don't know if you checked it out, but hopefully you did. I want to hear from you. But this is our episode that talks all about what's happening in supply chain for last week, I think. Was it June 28th? Yeah. It was last week. So go and check it out. It's got news articles, everything that we've got going on, latest podcasts, all of that. All right, what else have we got? Oh, so we came out with this post around jobs in supply chain and how they correlate to your sign. We had a lot of people really interested in this one. I was super surprised how many Scorpios are actually in supply chain and working within supply chain. I'm a Scorpio. I met a ton of other Scorpios that I didn't realize. Anyways, this was a fun one. We're going to put the link in the comments. Go and check it out. See if the job description actually matches your sign. I'd love to know. So send me a message. And last but not least, where did I put this? All right. I don't know if you guys saw this on Friday. Friday. But Audrey and I were in Colorado about a week ago. We had a really great experience at a cabin, a private cabin. And I decided to kind of do dude with a sign kind of vibes. And so I went with this picture. Supply chain is like nature, it is all around us. Now, we had a lot of great reactions on this, comments. Everybody agreed with that. And we had a little bit of fun on Friday. So hopefully you saw that. If not, go and check it out. The links are all in the comments. All right. So it's now time to bring up our guest for today. Patricia, how you doing?
Great. Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, it's good to see you. Now, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am the founder and CEO of Responsible Sourcing Network and also the founder of an initiative called Yes, Yarn Ethically and Sustainably Sourced. I have a diverse background working grassroots. I worked for the Gap for several years. I have been focused on forced labor, human rights, other aspects of responsible supply chain, but really focusing on the raw commodity area where there's abuse. And then therefore, there's a whole bunch of complexity. A friend of mine likes to call it a supply web because it's so complicated to get from where abuse is happening at raw commodity level and tracing that all the way through to a brand or retailer and having them understand what's going on. So I have been working on this. I focused on forced labor in Uzbekistan, forced child labor actually since 2007. And we've had a huge success there, actually, where they've really cleaned up their act after a lot of work and have been engaging corporations both in the apparel sector as well as the electronic sector, because I've also had a big focus on conflict minerals coming out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So, but I really believe in bringing everybody together, bring responsible investors, activists, corporations. I really think the best way to try to deal with these issues is if we all work together to do it.
Yeah, well, my sign, I'm not pointing very well. My sign says collaboration is the future of business. People are probably tired of me talking about this, but I love to hear that. You and I are on the same page about that. And you did some really great work. I mean, this is important work that obviously isn't spoken about too much. Obviously, people don't want to be saying whether they're using child labor or not. But what we're going to be talking about today is that it's actually bringing everybody to task and bringing it to light. And people really need to be aware of what is going on in their supply chains. Otherwise, it's going to cost them billions. Now, whoever is listening or watching, I want to hear from you. So let me know where you're watching, tuning in from. Put it in the comments. We'd love to put that up on the screen or give you a shout out. So make sure to do that. Now we're going to go to the poll first. Now this is going to set us up for the whole conversation today, because what we did was we ask a question every single Wednesday. But last week we asked a question specifically related to this particular topic. So are you aware of the new regulations impacting product entry? Now, we had just under 100 votes. I have a feeling that some people may not have wanted to answer or might not even understand what this actually means to them. And the reason why I say that is because 49% of you said no, but I want to learn more. 34% of you said yes, but need more information. And 14% said yes, fully aware and prepared. And so it's that, like 85% is why we're doing this episode today, right, Patricia? Like, talk to me about this poll. Was it surprising? What did you think?
It was totally surprising to me because there has been a law in place here in the U.S. For the last 2 years with certain restrictions on importation due to the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, where shipments are actually being detained. And I know we'll get into that in a little bit. But there's also been another law in the books and withhold release orders that the Customs and Border Protection also enforces, and that there's actually a lot of restrictions on what you can bring into the United States. And I know Canada actually has also passed some recent laws. So it's pretty interesting that so many people want to learn more, which is why I'm glad that we're actually talking about this.
Yeah, 49%. That's a huge number. No, but I want to learn more. So this is a really big topic for a lot of people. Now, before we get into the market update, want to give a shout out to Rick from Minneapolis, Minnesota, who is joining us today. I think you're just down the street from Patricia.
At the moment, I live in California, but I happen to be in Minneapolis today. So
that is awesome. Thanks for joining us, Rick. All right. So Patricia, give us a market update. Obviously, from the poll, we're seeing that people don't really know much about it. They want to learn more. They need more information. What are you seeing when you're talking to people about this? Is it urgent? Right? Is it something that they're like, yes, we really need to do something right now? Is it something that they're saying, oh, well, maybe in the future?
For the U.S., importing into the U.S., it's urgent, right? There's already a law in the books. There's already shipments being detained. So if you don't know and haven't been looking into and haven't been talking to your suppliers about where raw materials and different inputs are coming from, especially in the areas there's cotton and apparel, even synthetic apparel, tomatoes and some other agricultural products, solar, electronics. There's a lot of them that originate in the Xinjiang Uyghur region of China, and that could all be detained at the border. And now Europe has recently passed a forced labor regulation. They also have something called a due diligence directive for mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence. That doesn't go into force until 2027. But that should be on your radar. There's a deforestation legislation also on the books already in Europe. That should be on that actually should be something you're taking action on. So all of it indeed needs to be addressed both immediately and in the very near future.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about Xinjiang. I think I'm saying it right. We're going to talk about that in our first article. But before we get to that, tell me about your work in, was it Uzbekistan? I think, tell us what was happening there. You got a whole bunch of really big brands and retailers together. So talk to us about what you did there and what the effect was, the impact.
Great, thanks. So I mentioned going back to 2007, 2008, we started hearing about and seeing video of children being bussed out to cotton fields to harvest cotton every season. And this is something that had been going on for decades. It started under the Soviet system, but continued. And a lot of brands and retailers of cotton product had no clue that this was happening. And Uzbekistan was shipping its cotton all over the world, Bangladesh and India and elsewhere. And so we got together. We actually had a multi-stakeholder network. We had industry associations, American Apparel and Footwear, U.S. Fashion Industry Association, a lot of investors, faith-based, responsible impact investors, human rights groups, and we created something called the Cotton Campaign. And for years, we were trying to engage the Uzbek government, working with the U.S. government, and Responsible Sourcing Network, along with Cotton Campaign. We started a pledge, and over 300 brands and retailers signed this pledge saying they would not source Uzbek cotton, or not knowingly source, because they didn't really know, until the government stopped forcing the children. And eventually that was shifted to adults, but forcing anyone to go to the cotton fields to pick cotton. And in 2022, we finally ended that boycott. Because the government did stop doing it on a systematic level. They privatized the whole industry. There's still issues, there's still risk, but it's not at sending 1 million children out to the fields every year like they were doing when we first started that initiative.
Wow. And I think one of the things that we spoke about the other day was how important to get the government on board with you for that particular initiative, right?
But I would say it's both, the U.S. government, but also local government. Right. Yeah. I think the challenge with and why the whole law for this Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act is that it's more difficult to talk to the Chinese government about this abuse that's occurring. China is a whole different ballgame than Uzbekistan, where barely any brands were. Some brands were buying from there, not buying direct. They're buying indirect because the cotton was getting spun and woven in other countries. But they also weren't selling into that market. And so when you both have the market you're selling into as well as huge production done there, it's a lot more difficult to diversify or move your production.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So our first article talks about how the U.S. is escalating the search for forced labor ties in textiles from China. Now, the first thing that they talk about, and is it Uyghur? Did I pronounce that right? Uyghur. Okay.
Uyghur.
So it's the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. So can you give us sort of like a high level overview of what that actually is first before we get into the article?
Yeah, it makes the assumption that any product coming from the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, XUAR, which is a huge part of Western China, huge. It actually, there they grow 80% of all of China's cotton. And because China is the largest producer or second largest producer of cotton in the world, that's like 20% of all the world's cotton is coming from this particular region. But the government assumes that any product coming from this region is being made with forced labor because the government has set up camps, detention camps. They very much look like prisons. They have affiliated with them production. They're producing garment. They're producing electronics. Like I mentioned, solar panels, silica is coming from there. And that because of the mentality differences between the Chinese government and the Uyghur, and it's not just Uyghur, it's also other Turkic Muslim minority peoples, they are indoctrinating them with other types with the Chinese education. So they're both keeping them, if they're saying it's all poverty minimization, but unfortunately a lot of people have disappeared. A lot of people have been jailed, up to 1 million people. I've worked and talked to a lot of Uyghur activists whose family members have just disappeared. There's a lot online about it if you want to know more about the details. But what's important is that the US government thinks it's so egregious that they say anything coming from that region cannot be imported into the US. So in the case of textiles and cotton, it's the cotton, it's yarn, it's fabric, or a garment itself. So if that yarn and fabric is going to Vietnam or Bangladesh or some other place, you as a brand may not know that, but that product could then be stopped at the border.
Right. Well, and what you said was that they're assuming, right? So any package that talks about that it's coming from that region, or any textile or garment that they think may have come from that region, are being stopped. And so this article talks about between June 2022 to April 2024, 8,000 packages valued at $3.17 billion were stopped. Right. And from what I can see, almost 3,300 of those packages were actually denied entry. Now, that is a lot of money. That's a lot of packages. It's a lot of capital on the line that is moving around the world, getting denied and not being allowed entry. One of the challenges that they have, though, is because of the millions of packages that are coming in on a weekly, monthly basis from obviously different origins, it is hard for them to manage. But if you take this 8,000 package, they are getting better at it. And so you do need to understand where your products are coming in from, where the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers are, and get a better understanding of who's actually making some of that, being part of the raw materials, et cetera, because your products could be denied and it could cost you a lot of money, right?
And it coming from Xinjiang that's an automatic flag or denial if it's actually being shipped from Xinjiang. But the other thing the Chinese are doing now is that they're sending Uyghur people to other parts of China to work in factories in other parts of China. And those other factories now are being put on something called an entity list. And the US government they actually have a lot of resources on their website with the statistics, how many shipments they're stopping. And also they've started listing out these other locations that are prohibited from having anything come from them. So to do your own due diligence as an importer is you should be checking and making sure none of your product is coming from that entity list.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and Audrey Ross, who usually joins me on Thoughts and Coffee as well, she's all about compliance, right? So right now, it's really important to make sure that you are giving your compliance team, you have a compliance team, first of all, you're asking the right questions, but resourcing them with what they need to be able to comb through this, because I would assume that this is changing fairly rapidly and all the time.
All the time, and it's complicated. Like I said, was Mueller's supply web
Right.
is a lot of times when I first started talking to brands in 2008 about Uzbekistan, they had no idea where their cotton originated, right?
Mhm.
At least now there's new technologies. There's blockchain. You have different digital platforms to start to map out your suppliers. We'll get into like next steps in a moment, but it's becoming easier, but it's still not necessarily,
Yeah.
that much.
Yeah. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. We're going to bring you a resource at the end of the show that you might want to check out and sign up for, because obviously this is something that's going to keep affecting retailers. All right, let's get to our second article. So this article is talking about the supply of vanilla. So all you bakers out there, listen up, because there is a potential shortage on vanilla. It's actually one of the most expensive spices to be curated and to be shipped because of the hand curing process, which I had no idea about, first of all. A lot of vanilla comes from Madagascar, but there are a lot of different places that you can get it from. And the next best option is Uganda. What they're saying here in this article is that they want to encourage people to diversify their supply base based on this potential shortage for vanilla. The reason why I wanted to bring this particular article up, and I know, Patricia, you were talking about electronics and textiles and all that kind of stuff, but I do want to talk about the importance of diversifying suppliers. But if you're doing it quickly, like the due diligence that needs to be done, right? No matter what industry that you're in, to make sure that it's coming from the right regions without forced labor, et cetera, because again, you don't want to get denied. Do you have anything, maybe like, what did this article say to you? And is there anything that you would say around diversifying suppliers?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it in regards to diversification. And I mean, in the case of vanilla, because it's not grown everywhere, if you need to find new suppliers, or because the flooding's impacting the entire country, that means you maybe have to switch countries from where you're sourcing from. And then you want to know, what are the risks in that country, right?
Yes.
What are the geopolitical risks? What about transportation? Right? I mean, are there different transportation routes? And as well as then the due diligence on the suppliers themselves and being able to ship on time. What kind of customer service do they have? Quality. I mean, it takes a long time to train new suppliers, as well as even to decide what countries you're going to source from. A lot of the brands that I talk to, they actually have programs laid out that before they go into any new country, they do a lot of due diligence on that country. So that
Yeah.
stuff doesn't happen overnight. And I think also with climate change and more flooding and more droughts, there's going to be shifting, which I'm sure you also talk about a lot in your
Yeah.
show.
So one of the things that I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned in the last article how they didn't even know where their cotton was being sourced. So how do you actually do enough due diligence? Because obviously they're not going to come out and say, this is what we do to get the raw material or the product or all that kind of stuff. How do you actually do that due diligence to really find out the source and where it's coming from and how it's being cured?
It's a lift, and
Mm.
nobody said any of this is going to be easy, but especially with the European law is a mandatory due diligence law, which means that, and it's all the way to raw material. So it's not just your tier one suppliers. You need to be conducting mapping. First, you need to understand who all these entities are. And then you need to start understanding how are they operating and how are they working with their own suppliers and their sub-suppliers, right? So this is what the electronics industry went through about a dozen years ago, because there was the Dodd-Frank Act and conflict mineral law, where they needed, and the industry actually came together. So I think when your industries work together to work through some of these challenges, you're better off. It ends up being more inexpensive and more efficient. Therefore, everybody's got to set these systems up, start checking on these multi-tier suppliers, and understanding where the raw materials originate. When commodity brokers and traders get into the picture, and when commodities like cotton and other minerals are traded on stock exchanges, et cetera, then it becomes even more confusing because the product moves so quickly. And also it goes through warehouses. It becomes a challenge.
Yeah, it just grows bigger and bigger. Now, we have an episode with Altana, which is a digital platform, coming up in a couple of weeks on the podcast. And we actually get into this and how technology can help and how their technology is helping to figure all of this out for their clients and things like that. All right. Well, I promised you a resource to gain more understanding and information about this particular topic, because I know at 49%, there's a lot of people out there that really need to get some more information on this. So Patricia, talk to us about this webinar that you've got coming up on July 16th. What can people learn? What can people expect? Why should they sign up?
Great. Well, it is, first of all, I would say it's geared toward the apparel and home goods industry. That's where we're focused right now, because we are focused on forced labor and cotton. This could be expanded in the future. But if this topic's new to you, it would still be quite interesting. We also have a bunch of webinars, recordings on our own website. But what we're going to be talking about, so YES is a fairly new initiative. We piloted it and came out with our own standards in 2022. We've now partnered with a audit management firm called Sumera, and they're currently managing audits as well for the Leather Working Group, for the Social Labor Convergence Program, for HIG, and the Cascale. So they already are working with 1,000 auditors around the world, which is great for us because it's going to help us scale. So we're now going to be laying out our plans for scaling. We need to train auditors. And we are currently in India and Pakistan, and we're expanding to Bangladesh and Vietnam. So we're going to be laying out our plan for the next 18 months. And the YES initiatives, basically, it is specifically for fabric mills and spinning mills. Mm-hmm. And it's implementing a due diligence approach. So it's talking about what kind of management systems do they have. Our initiative follows the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Developments. They have a framework for due diligence, which is what the European legislation is all based on. So it's having management systems in place, understanding risk management. How do you identify, and then you want to prevent and mitigate the harm? And it could be any kind of harm. And really our initiative in the future could be expanded to other environmental and decent work harm. But as I mentioned, right now, it could also be expanded to other materials. But we got to stay focused to get this off the ground. Well, and then we'll go from there.
I was going to ask you, I know you said it's focused on textiles and yarn, but can it be translated for other types of products? Like if I were to sign up and you're talking about the due diligence and maybe a checklist and things like that, can those resources be applied to, maybe my industry in electronics or food or et cetera, et cetera?
So there is something called the Responsible Minerals Initiative, mm-hmm. Which has a focus on smelters and refiners. So again, that's looking at the cobalt and the copper and nickel and all the gold, et cetera. So they're really focused on the electronics industry. Like palm oil has another initiative. But the basics of the due diligence framework that the OECD has laid out are the same. And I do think that, having management systems, how you manage your supplier, what kind of requirements you have of your suppliers. Once you have the basics in place, your own policies and procedures, then you can add different types of risk on top of it. So, awesome. To your point, it can easily be adapted. We actually adapted a lot of our standards and tools and resources from the electronics industry, from that Responsible Minerals Initiative. Yeah. So it can be applied to others, and you can use it as a framework for what you should do in other industries as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we've put the link to that webinar in the comments. I will be going and adding it to my personal LinkedIn right after we wrap the show. But it sounds so interesting, right? We do need a due diligence framework. We do need to look at technology partners who can help us and make sure that we are doing that due diligence, making sure that our supply chains are not only secure, but they're healthy. Right? In a variety of different ways. So Patricia, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all this information with us today. You know, there's so many people out there that don't even know this is going on, and we need to spread the word about it. So thanks for all the great work and the impact that you are making, because this is a really, really important topic. And I'm going to see everybody again next week for Thoughts and Coffee. Eric Johnson's going to be my guest for that show, and we're going to have some fun. We're going to be talking about some really fun supply chain topics. So Patricia, thanks for joining me. Everybody at home, thanks for joining me as well. And we'll see you next week. Have a great week, everyone.